Well, shalom. Again, thanks for joining me. I'm going to hit Numbers chapter 17 as part of our Bible lesson. And so I'm going to go through it pretty quick. But this is chapter 17. Again, I'm reading from the Complete Jewish Study Bible, which I really enjoy this translation, okay? So Adonai says to Moshe, tell Eleazar, the son of Aharon, the Cohen, to remove the fire pans from the fire. You remember the previous video is from Numbers 16, and the 250 men that were burning the fire, the incense in their fire pans. God burned them and burned them up. And so now God is telling them to grab those 250 fire pans, and watch what they're going to do. Get the fire pans, and because also the fire pans of these men whose sin cost them their lives have become holy because they were offered before Adonai. Therefore, have them hammered into plates to cover the altar. This will be a sign for the people of Israel. Eleazar the Cohen took the brass fire pans, which the men who had been burned to death had offered, and they hammered them into a covering for the altar to remind the people of Israel that an ordinary person, not descended from Aharon, is not to approach and burn incense before Adonai if he wants to avoid the fate of Korah and his group, as Adonai has said to him through Moshe. So those brass fire pans got hammered into plates covering over the altar. So every time you went to the altar to bring your lamb or your goat or your bull for a sin offering, you looked at that brass hammered plating on there and reminded you, you're not as special as you think you are. Maybe you ought to be humble before God and let the folks who are called by God to do this work, and you respect them and appreciate them. That's a pretty good lesson. So then starting around verse 6. But the very next day, you'd think they'd already learned a lesson, but no, not this time. The very next day, the whole community of the people of Israel complained against Moshe and Aaron. You've killed Adonai's people. However, as the community was assembling against Moshe and Aaron, they looked in the direction of the tent of meeting and saw the cloud cover it and the glory of Adonai appear. Moshe and Aaron came to the front of the tent of meeting. And Adonai says to Moshe, get away from this assembly and I will destroy them at once. But they fell on their faces. And Moshe said to Aaron, take your fire pan, put fire from the altar in it, lay incense on it, and hurry with it to the assembly to make atonement for them, because the anger has gone out from Adonai, and the plague has already begun. Aaron took it as Moshe has said and ran into the middle of the assembly. There the plague had already begun among the people, but he added the incense and made atonement for the people. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. Those dying from the plague numbered 14,700, besides those who had died in the Korah incident, that was over 250. Aaron returned to Moshe at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and the plague was stopped. God was judging the people for, again, their sin of rebellion. They constantly rebelled against God and against his leadership. They had disrespect for God. They had disrespect for God's leadership. And they kept thinking, this is, all somebody else's fault. They quit, they just wouldn't take responsibility for their own actions, for their own lack of belief. And so God sent a plague among them. 14,700 people died in this plague. But I love this picture. Here is Aaron standing there holding that censer with the smoldering smoke coming out from the incense, standing between the living and the dead. What a picture that is of how Jesus takes care of you and me. He stands between you and me and God. He is our mediator. Jesus is our mediator between God and man. And here, this picture of Aaron between God and sinful man, stopping the plague. What a good picture of Jesus. And then verse 16. Adonai says to Moshe, speak to the people of Israel, take from them staffs, one for each ancestral tribe, from each leader of a tribe, 12 staffs. Write each man's name on his staff, and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi, for each tribe's leader is to have one staff. Put them in the tent of meeting in front of the testimony where I meet with you. The staff of the man I'm going to choose will sprout buds. In this way, I will put a stop to the complaints of the people of Israel keep making against you. Remember, they keep on complaining that, who do you think you are, Moses and Aaron? You think you're better than us? You think you're special than us? Well, here's what God is going to say. I'm going to show you who is the leaders and who's not. So watch what he does. So they each have a staff, like a shepherd's staff, and they each write their tribe's name on the staff, 12 tribes, 12 staffs, and they bring them up to the tent of meeting. And Moshe spoke to the people of Israel. This is verse 21 in Numbers 17. Moshe spoke to the people of Israel, and all their leaders gave him staffs, one for each leader, according to their ancestral tribes, 12 staffs. Aaron's staff was among their staffs. Moses put the staffs before Adonai in the tent of the testimony. The next day Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and there he saw that Aaron's staff for the house of Levi had budded. It had sprouted not only buds, but flowers, and ripe almonds as well. Moshe brought out all the staffs from before Adonai to all the people of Israel, and they looked, and each man took back his staff. Remember what God said, I'm just going to make it bud. And any old staff that's still just a plain old stick of wood, that means you're not as special as you think you are. But the one whose staff buds, that's the one I've chosen. Man, Aaron's staff didn't just bud. It had flowers. It even had almonds on it. How about that? And Moshe, Adonai says to Moshe, return Aaron's staff to its place in front of the testimony. It is to be kept there as a sign to the rebels, so that they will stop grumbling against me and thus not die. Moshe did this. He did as Adonai had ordered him. But the people of Israel said to Moshe, oh no, we're dead men, lost. We are all lost. Whenever anyone approaches the tabernacle of Adonai, he dies. We will all perish. Of course, here's the interesting thing about that. By the way, that's the end of chapter 17. What I think is fascinating about that is how God chose Aaron, and then the people were terrified. Finally, they had this moment of respect. It doesn't last long, by the way, but they had this moment of respect where they realized how fearful it is to fall in the hands of the living God. When God chooses judgment, he makes it happen, doesn't he? But look at who he chose. When he chose Aaron, he really chose him. He didn't just have a staff bud. He had it make flowers and even almonds to come from it. How about that? And notice again, one more sign. The hammered brass fire pans on the altar was a sign to remind you, don't rebel against God. Now you have to have a staff of Aaron with buds and almonds on it to be another sign. How many signs do you need before you figure out, maybe I should stop rebelling against God? Maybe I should trust God. Maybe I should trust God's leadership and just quit complaining and griping and follow and obey. But sometimes we just don't learn those lessons no matter how we need them to be. Join me for the next one.